Thanks for having me here, Shogun. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. So, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. My name is Shogun. Joining me today is my good friend Drac'aar, and we have a hell of a story for you today, a hell of a piece of the puzzle, of the conspiracy theory puzzle. So Drac'aar identifies as a reptilian soul incarnated on Earth, and he has some disclosure information for us about a narrative in which this planet was originally inhabited by reptilians. Those reptilians were destroyed by some other alien force, and we are now engaged in some kind of struggle for the future of planet Earth, which will culminate in the arrival of an alliance of other alien beings. And we're going to get into all that, as well as the shadow government and a lot more. But before we do, please join us on the Roundtable Discord server. Make sure you've joined us on YouTube and BitChute. We have over 250 episodes of the Roundtable podcast uploaded. Every subject you can imagine. Find it in hashtag RT Podcast in the Roundtable Discord server, where we record every day at 8 p.m. Central. That being said, welcome, Drac'aar. Thank you for joining me. How are you, my friend?
I'm just now getting relaxed enough to really do this with you guys, and it's an honor to be here. Where to begin?
Well, why don't we begin with your because you told me that your understanding of these situations was not based on your own research, but rather was based on your own experiences.
Correct.
Why don't you tell us about the first time that you personally experienced the reptilians? How did that happen?
It was an outer body experience.
How did you come to know that these beings existed?
It was an outer body experience when I was 6 years old. It could be defined practically as a broadcast from a very complex and powerful being on a very far away planet to broadcast a story not unsimilar to the story that's occurring here on Earth with humanity, without the shadow government manipulations and the ET affiliations. It was a bad situation on that planet, and those beings, they had fixed the problem. I'm going to leave it at that because that's an entire story in itself. I was 6 years old. I was too young to really understand what I had experienced during the experience that I'd understood and seen and remember understanding. But when I returned to my body in my bed as a child, I truly didn't understand what I had experienced, and had to make sense of that and all the spontaneous experiences I was subjected to. But it was both a blessing and a curse all at the same time. The traumatic experiences, communication with entities, both reptilian and non-reptilian alike, the outer body experiences, in tune with myself way more than I knew as a young child. Growing up, it situated myself to who I am today, and the story continues to go on. I want to first really mention to those who might not understand what the word reptilian encompasses. It encompasses not a single race of beings, but an entire collection of thousands of countless beings, that a species that exists on many different planets in many different cultures and many different ways of living, ages. And we can look at the Draconians as an ancient reptilian race, a very old reptilian race, and that's just one race. The Earth here, this planet, the original, naturally, what you would consider a naturally occurring, intelligent race, was a reptilian race, and this was their home. They had lived here when Pangea was when all the continents were one land mass. If you keep that in mind, that we're not speaking, when you use the word reptilian, that we're not speaking about all one singular race of beings, and to be inclusive and understand that when judging a species, it's impossible to blanket coat them as bad or good. Chogan?
Sorry, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, I'm gonna start off by saying that this planet was a garden planet. This was a great planet, within territorial bounds of what I consider to be a galactic alliance that was formed millions and millions and millions of years ago. Beginning with how you would imagine it, us intelligent race of beings becoming spacefaring and traveling to other planets, meeting other intelligent races, and forming alliances. This particular alliance, the one that oversees this territory where Earth is in the galaxy, started off with reptilian races and originated as more of a reptilian-based alliance, and they considered themselves as such, and sure, as humans would, if they, in this instance, if it wasn't this situation I'm going to describe, they would find other beings that are looking like them in skin and upright position, or however they may look in any species. Looking for other beings that are like them would relate to them better because of that similarity. So that's how it began, and the alliance was built up from then on, and thousands of species had got involved, and with the alliance, they feel comfortable with the alliance. They protect themselves from natural disasters. They've served each other in ways that are extravagant to the utmost extent of protecting one's own planet and species. And it's an ultimate force, and that starts to encompass an actual territory in the galaxy. This alliance, you could picture it as a circle that represents the territory. It's not that simple, but to simplify it, Earth and Mars and the areas around here are located on the edges of the influence of the alliance. There was an original galactic war that happened that could be in relation, and I say could be because this isn't something I'm sure of. And mind you, I want everyone here to understand that this is not to convince anyone that this is true. This is my experience, and in my experiences alone. If I'm unsure of something, it's because I haven't had enough experience to be sure enough to say it with a certainty. And that this is not a preaching to the choir type deal. This is a sharing of the experience. Take of it what you will. And to continue what I was saying, so on the edges of this territory is located Earth, and this war had broken out. You can call them the Orion Wars. People refer to them sometimes. Galactic wars. Many planets destroyed, many species extinct, and that lasted a very, very, very long time. This animosity between the alliance and another alliance of equal strength, if you will, equal more or less, one that can pose a threat to either side. Earth's involvement is unclear to me in my experiences, and in that whether this galactic war and its decline, when essentially treaties, like in human wars, where treaties would be signed, people get tired of wars and peace is starting to come, and people forget why they're fighting and are just tired of all the bloodshed and tired of all the destruction, and forgot completely why they were fighting to begin with. It's been so long, and everybody just wants to start fighting. So the flame of war, the candle flame on which was burning brightly and destroying everything in its path, it started to dwindle down. And that's where we're at now, where the animosity was, or I say was, but it is dying down, and hopefully will reach an end that there will be a mutual best interest in which both sides will be able to collaborate in a more friendly manner than destroying each other. Earth itself, when the Earth native reptilians, at a certain point in their existence, had very fair technology. They were spacefaring. Mars was a planet inhabited both by them and another reptilian race. They were two different species. They essentially were forming alliances, but they were not in direct contact with the alliance just yet. They were just forming alliances and extending that territory. These other beings had simply appeared from the edge of that territory. Remember, envision a circle that represents that territory, and that the Earth and this area of the galaxy, our solar system, and nearby solar systems and inhabitable planets, are on the edge, and that makes a big difference. It makes us vulnerable, because it makes Earth vulnerable, because it's so close to foreign territory, and that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, but in this case it did turn out bad. In a certain time period on Earth, these beings had arrived on Earth that were presenting themselves as peaceful, or neutral, I should say, at first, and gave the native reptilians no real reason to question that they would just suddenly do what they did. And I'll get to that in 1 second. It was underhanded. They wanted to see what was going on the planet, basically, before conducting this very heinous act. These other beings that had invaded Earth and attacked these reptilian beings. In my experience, that showed me this is very traumatic for me. Looking through the eyes of a little girl, a reptilian little girl, who was on the outskirts of one of the settlements on Pangea. She was gathering flowers for I'm not sure why, but she was gathering flowers, and everything seemed okay. It was a nice, bright, sunny day, and beams of orangish white light came down from the sky and incinerated the entire settlement in seconds. Turned it into a giant pile of rubble and ash, and just smoke, black smoke. The blast, she was not close enough to be killed. And you can envision this experience as I'm more or less along for the ride. I'm not making choices. I'm seeing through her eyes and what had occurred. She was injured, but she was able to still run and walk, and was only caring about her mother. She was still very young. She climbed over what was very hot, still very hot material, big pile of it, that extended for miles and miles and miles. Just nothing but rubble and smoke. And the wind was carrying away the smoke after she had braced herself, and she's crying in this tone that I can't replicate, but it hurts my heart to even think about. It hurts me very badly. It's just, like I said, traumatizing. But if you imagine if you didn't have vocal cords and were yelling out for your mother in emotion, and these like I can't replicate it. And in any case, I wouldn't want to, because it brings me more closer to that experience, which is like I said, traumatic. She tread upon this mass of destruction, crawling over the dead bodies of her people, what was left of them anyway, in the rubble of her once functioning and peaceful settlement. Just crying for her mother, but she's buried underneath this entire chaotic destruction. And she does this for a while, searching for her mother and crying out, and reaches the other end of the destruction, and had to slide down, because she had recognized two other adult survivors on the outskirts of what had been destroyed. It was two adult male reptilians of her species. One was critically injured, and the other was not. She approached them for what anybody would in that position, to find safety and comfort, still rocked by the disappearance of her family and her mother. She, the other male reptilian, was tending to the right arm, and the right foot of the critically injured reptilian. And while she approached them, 5 tall, human-like beings that stood around 10, 11 feet tall, maybe, were wearing suits and approaching. This is where I had to forcibly end the experience, and personally, I don't need to speak any further. But none of them survived in this experience here. What had actually occurred, what had actually shown to me, was that this occurred. This beam of light was a weapon of destruction, to conquer this planet, means to dominate and can take the planet for themselves. And it was a very destructive weapon that had actually caused Pangea to split into, not immediately split, but had created fractures in the internal Earth system, which eventually cracked over many years to form the continents we live on today. Those strikes on those settlements were the focal points, and why the continents are shaped like that. Every settlement was targeted, but not every reptilian being had died, and like I said, they were highly technological, not to an extreme, but enough to be spacefaring, enough to go to Mars. Simultaneously, they were also attacking Mars. And communications between them and the reptilians on Mars had reached through underground, emergency bases, that were spaceship shuttles that were meant to go far away from what they're used to going. They hadn't expanded far enough to really go further than the solar system, and they perhaps could have made it to another planet, but they were unprepared for such an attack, and very, very few managed to escape with their lives and head towards what was basically a random direction to them. Mars and beings from Mars and Earth had blasted off basically in those directions and somehow escaped destruction. The Alliance took notice and honed and took these species in. There were already planets that existed to take in homeless species that were remnants of the galactic wars that were homeless because their planets were either destroyed or uninhabitable at the end of the conflicts. So there were planets that the Alliance had dedicated to beings that were suited to the climate and the atmosphere and could survive there, and had brought them in to survive there because Earth was now a hostile territory. Mars was attacked in a way that dissipated the entire atmosphere, and everyone on there had essentially perished. So the Earth reptilians, in this experience I had, was managed to escape in that direction and are still existing on this home planet, this planet for basically refugees without a home. This is a very old story. The planet Earth and Mars were not the only planets targeted. It was an entire region, and other planets and other nearby solar systems were also targeted. It is a complicated situation, and these beings began to try to utilize what was left of Earth because it still had an atmosphere. With this atmosphere, they sought to use it, but they knew from what their technology, they were not unintelligent beings. They were smart enough to know that they could not step foot on the Earth without being subjected to UV rays from the sun that were far too strong in comparison to where they came from. These human-like beings. They look very human, but just subtle feature differences, very pale skin. And that is a physical attribute to not being used to UV rays. They had devised some method of genetically creating an extension of themselves, since they could not they themselves survive without suits and such and preparations. They could not actually step foot on the planet without it. They needed somehow to take control of the planet, dominate it, and for an unknown reason to me, populate it with what we would now call our own human race. They genetically engineered with their own DNA in combination with earthly genetics to be able to condition this species they were intending to birth to be able to survive the climatic conditions of Earth naturally without needing suits. In conjunction, they needed to also tend to other planets along with their allies. These human-like beings were not alone in their endeavors. The other planets that I will just remain distant from mentioning that are involved in all this too, and that were also attacked. They had to form a conduit between these planets, and so after creating the human race, experimenting with genetics, which what they had already done by when they were trying to pretend to be friendly with the Earth native reptilians before the attack, they had came up with experimental humans over and over and over again over a long period of time. And slowly but surely had became what we are here today. I'm just think of where to start now.
Well, so you've given us a lot of great information, but for a lot of people, this is going to be a lot to take on board. So my understanding is what you're saying is this Earth was not originally inhabited by humans, but it was actually inhabited by reptilians. So the original inhabitants of the Earth that we live on were reptilians, not humans. But at a later time, a different alien species who resembled humans, but they were tall or large humans, came to Earth and destroyed with orbital strikes, devastating orbital strikes, a genocidal campaign, and actually wiped out the indigenous reptilians, except for a few who were driven underground. And then they genetically engineered humanity as we know it today to look like them. So we humans, you and I, are actually the descendants of the people who wiped out the original reptilians, but now the reptilians hate us because we took their planet. Is that correct?
They don't. Okay. One thing you misunderstood. They went underground because that's where they had prepared for emergencies, but not of that caliber. They had spacefaring ships, not very large, not like humongous motherships, but they had ships, and it was originally intended to be like an emergency if the planet were to face certain doom from some natural disaster or something. They could not have predicted that this would have happened, but the ones who survived made it to these locations. These safeguards went into these ships, collected as many survivors as quickly as they could without catching attention, because they themselves would have been attacked while trying to escape the atmosphere, which some were, unfortunately, and that's why very few survived. And yes, that's what I meant by going underground. They went underground because that's where these ships were located, and that's how they were able to escape. As far as the theories that claim that they went underground and that they still are underground, I don't have any personal experience at all that had told me that that is true. I'm not saying that it is or isn't. I'm saying that I had no experiences that tell me that that is what happened or it was a part of what happened. Remember, this is all from my experience alone, not from something I've read. If it is true that that there are existing native reptilians underground in some formational underground facilities, that would break my heart, because I could only imagine being stuck underground, living on a planet under the surface of the planet in fear. And if they're still alive today, it would be even more tragic to me personally, because these are beings that I don't originate from the Earth. My soul does not originate from the Earth Native Reptilian Collective, but I sympathize with them and very sensitive to their devastation, the devastation that occurred to them. So in that aspect, and I don't know if they had went going underground. That was not shown to me during these experiences, and I was not able to gather anything like that. And nothing ever pointed to any sort of underground survival mechanism. All I know is that some managed to leave the planet, survived because they fell into the warm arms of the Alliance, which they were lucky to be noticed and taken in and survive. And it's been a long, long time since, so they are alive and in decent numbers, because they have to coexist with other homeless beings that fit this planet that was dedicated to the homeless. So they still were able to continue on elsewhere. After of which, they continued their venture on Earth, the humans, the large humans that had committed this galactic war crime, continued their experimentations, genetic experimentations, repeatedly, forming different races over long periods of time, while also creating a kind of human race that was meant to never live on the planet, but serve as a conduit between them and the Earth's humans that they created, and that would be represented by our current shadow government. Their sole purpose was to guide humans in specific directions and raise them in a certain fashion. So the humans were born to be controlled, born on this planet, not by our choice. At that point, skipping ahead in time, the continents divide. New races that are formed that they kept trying to improve on their genetic creations, and kept wiping out their own creations when they failed in bringing back new races that they formed that they thought were more superior in their genetic structure and would be better, more intelligent, they were, like I said, experimenting. It was clear that they're not used to doing this type of thing and were unprepared to exact this plan. The different regions of the planet does not define the nationalities of certain human genome structures and family tree lines. They are perfectly in tune. They're attuned to basically being different genetic origins over a period of time. And if I had this chart and I was able to show you, I would be able to show you the scientific human understanding of how humans came to be from certain time zones and time periods. But there's huge gaps and basically missing spaces that it doesn't make sense how certain genetic qualities of, like, for example, the Asians in the Eastern continent and versus the Middle Eastern continent and North America and South America and South Africa, all regions used to populate the earth with us, essentially, leading all the way up to where we are now. The shadow government used religion as a means to deliver truth and deception, to appeal to the humans they created and control them in a way that appealed to them and their goals, which is simply control. They want to use Earth for some reason, and I don't quite understand their methods of methodology, and how this current situation on this planet, now that we're experiencing, benefits them. I have a few theories, but they're just theories. I don't have experiences to back them up. I am here as an extension of the Alliance, a response to finally a response to this cataclysm, which is an ongoing Cold War that has been going on for longer than I probably even know. Beings like myself we're not human souls, and we inhabit human bodies, and from birth, using technology that is far beyond their capabilities. and we're able to birth our specific consciousnesses within the human body, nearing the embryo stages of conception. I'm sorry, the stages of conception, and in which soul aligns with the baby in the egg, the sac, the stomach of the woman. Now, to give some little bit more background on what I just explained, you could look at Noah's Ark and how each and every animal was saved in that story. That the genetics of animals and every living creature of significance alike was used in these experiments. And Noah's Ark was essentially a reset when their experiments weren't going the way they liked it. They also pillaged the planet for resources and used humans for that as well. But that wasn't their sole purpose. They wanted to dominate this planet for territory and to expand themselves and their influence. This is a territorial dispute, a galactic, interplanetary dispute. We, as we are now, are about to go through something very intense very soon. And it's all relevant to this very old story I'm telling you, and to everyone here and whoever might listen to it in the future. That whatever happens, it's the result of this Cold War, represented by me being in this body, turning into an all-out war. Most of which would be invisible to us because it would be outside our atmosphere and in space. A lot of fighting in space, but it will reach Earth. My collective origin is a part of the Alliance. My species and where I'm used to, the bodies that I'm used to inhabiting, the reptilian beings that I'm a part of. We volunteered among many other species to assist not only Earth but the other regions that were dominated, and birthing us in human bodies, where specifically for me was to gather intelligence and reconnaissance to basically understand humans from their point of view in their body and study what was going on as far as their manipulation tactics goes of the shadow government and how they coerce humans to do what they do. I see people right now wanting to raise their hands, and I think this is a good time to pause for a moment and answer a few questions if someone would like to ask.
So thank you very much. Great information. Anyone who wants to ask a question, just hit that wave icon and line yourself up. And Sir Ben, if you had a question, go ahead and ask.
Yeah, I got a question that I actually wrote down for a quick sec. It's like a multi-part one, but so I'll just try to just make it as clear as I can for the question. Do you believe in the hollow earth concept? And do you think that these reptilian beings, the ones that survived or ran away, could be potentially living under the earth's crust right now within like the massive caverns and catacombs that are underneath the earth? And if you think so to like positively to any of those, do you think that if they return, that these reptilian beings would be able to recognize humans that have a reptilian soul within them per se? Not sure I said that right, but that's just kind of how I think it sounds right.
I do not have experiences that tell me that for the certainty. All I can do is hope that they would recognize, but I do not believe in this hollow earth theory. I believe the word belief implies not knowing, because belief implies that there is doubt, that there is something that makes a person uncertain of what they're trying to explain. When I explain what I do, how I explain it as best I can to everyone, if I'm sounding certain, it's because I had enough experiences of my own to be certain of these things. It's not to pressure anyone into believing anything of any of this is true, because I don't expect anyone to just take this on as a part of their reality. But no, I don't have an experience that tells me that reptilians escaped underground. And I don't believe in any Hollow Earth story. Theory.
Okay. Well, so I answered my question. Thank you.
It was the last question you answered. That I only hope that they would recognize souls like myself, but I have my doubts. We're here to serve a purpose, and me myself, I know my purpose ends with self-sacrifice. That we'll get into after this line of questioning is over, and get into my involvement in this whole situation.
All right. Well, thank you, Drac'aar. I think I'm good, Shogun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for your question. Whoever wants to jump up here, just wave the emoji, and we'll bring you up. If nobody has a question, I'll continue the interview, but it looks like this person wants to speak. So, Fluffy Bunny, did you have a question for Drac'aar? If so, you could come up, but you're hitting your thing. All right. Well, since there isn't a hand wave right now, I'd like to continue the interview. So you've talked a lot about the narrative of the extraterrestrials, the reptilians, the war for the Earth, but you also identify yourself as being a reptilian soul on Earth. So why don't we dive into that now that we've got the historical narrative of the past? Tell us about what it means to be a reptilian soul yourself.
Okay. The idea of multiple realities and multidimensional beings is what I understand, what allows a person to perform psychic or energetic or non-physical achievements, practical achievements, projections, and so forth, and affecting things in their reality physically. Physically being more extreme, such as telekinesis, etc. What it means to be a reptilian soul, if you had imagined a species represented as a collective that exists on multiple planes of existences, the human race being a species, though genetically created, still represents a collective that exists and was already awaiting to exist on the physical plane, and use these genetic creations as a means to manifest themselves into those physical bodies, us, which basically encompasses this planet's entire human collective. As I said before, there are many different reptilian species, all of which represent separate collectives themselves. Me, when I say I'm of a reptilian consciousness, or of a different reptilian collective, I'm referring to a specific collective of a specific species that exists far away from Earth. We volunteered our time and our efforts to help the Alliance because our services were of need. And we accepted, and along with many other species that had technology and knowledge that was very much needed to accomplish what we need to accomplish here, which is to win the war and keep planets like Earth that still are inhabitable, to keep them inhabitable after we've won the war. It's not a question of whether we can actually win the war. We know we can win. The problem is that they threaten the sanctity of this planet if they are backed into a corner war-wise. But that was the answer to my question. I'm going to let you speak after I had answered the soul origin question. So my soul origins from a specific species collective that exists on these multiple planes of existence, and that extends to infinity. We're just focused and honed in as physical beings, and because of that, we have bodies and can operate both on the physical and the astral, the less complex reality that contains our dreamscapes and our thoughts and concepts more so. And the ethereal plane, which is the more complex spiritual realm of existence. This is what makes us humans multidimensional, because we are connected to these adjacent realms of existence and can perform techniques via altered states. I hope that answers your question.
So we got a few other people who want to ask questions, but we're going to try and bring the Red Dragon up here. Yeah. Hey, Red Dragon, you got a question for Mr. Drac'aar?
Yeah, I was going to ask, what happens if one spirit tries to reincarnate into one of these said universes?
Could you please repeat that?
What happens if a spirit or being tries to reincarnate into one of these universes? Would they know? And if so, what would happen?
What spirit?
Any spirit in general, let's say an angel.
That I would say that it could happen on a natural scale, but in my particular case, it was specific. That I was specifically born into this body and into this situation, and in very various ways, my way of learning about spirituality, my background, and how I grew up and came to understand and learn and be connected and experience these beings and grow up was a sort of divine guidance that allowed me to do my due diligence and learn in a specific order on aspects of myself and reality, so that I can do what I'm supposed to do here, what I was meant to do here. A spirit, you're talking about any spirit can.
Yeah, just in general, one that has been on Earth before.
Yeah, I would say that it would probably be possible, but I can't say for certain. I would say,
would they get caught immediately or at some point in life?
that I will get into, because it is part of how I got involved and how the shadow government it ties all into what's happening with me. But I can give you just a little brief answer to that, is that it has to do with your abilities to use altered states and affect your reality around you via the non-physical means. Your psychic potential, your energy field, and how expanded it can be, how much energy you are receiving and expressing from yourself simultaneously, to both be affected by your environment, which is the energy coming in, and influence your environment, which is the energy coming out. You're like a portal or a filter. That energy flows in and out at a certain rate. The more that rate of energy increases, the more your energy expands. The shadow government has technology or some sort of radar, and this is something really important to understand, and I'll get back to this later too. that once you reach a certain higher state that's powerful enough that it reaches a threshold, it raises alarms. The shadow government will respond and will come with a furious vengeance. Like that's I will get back to that subject.
I was
later.
going to ask what happens to the spirit when they do find out.
And that's a circumstantial that's a circumstantial question.
Like, would they try to torture them or kill them?
That is it possible. That was what I was told when I was younger. That what could have been a fate of mine had I become unveiled. But I did become unveiled November 2017, and I'll get to that. Could you be patient and listen to?
All right. So fantastic. Thank you for your question, Red Dragon. Do you want to take a few more questions, Drac'aar?
I'll take as many as they can come at.
Okay. We're gonna go to let's see who's up. Looks like Rafi Cam. I don't know how. Oh, actually, we'll go to Avion. Avion, you've been invited to speak. You should be able to jump up here. Hopefully. Still not 100% sure how to use this interface. Hey, Avion, you got a question for Drac'aar?
So I missed the beginning of the podcast, so I apologize if this was already answered. But what do you think the future of the planet will look like if Reptilians win this war versus if the opposing group were to win this war?
Well, where the alliance is not comprised of mostly reptilians, there's actually more non-reptilian at this point with all the species that are of the alliance. There is many reptilian races a part of the alliance, but the amount of expansion of the territory, it ran into many non-reptilian species, and it can no longer be defined as the reptilian alliance or a reptilian-oriented alliance, because there's more non-reptilian species than there is reptilian species. There's you got to think thousands of species, like thousands of planets extending very far out and wide. So if you're asking me what would be the most positive outcome to this situation,
Yes.
if we win, if everything goes how we want it to go, we will have fought off the ones that are controlling and manipulating humanity at this current moment. The ones that extend from the shadow government and to the beings responsible for this devastation from the very beginning, that still remain in this area of space. They will be driven off. The Earth will be inhabitable still, but still affected inevitably by this war. The remaining humans, the surface, what they call, what the shadow government would call surface humans, us, what's left of the humans will be not eliminated, and this is because that it wasn't their choice to come here and be born here and be genetically created. They didn't commit any crimes, although they are responsible for choosing as a human collective to fall down the traps of manipulations laid down by them, by the ones that created them. They really had no chance, because not only are they a child species, they are an extension of their own genetics, and they know what line of evolution they're going to take, both spiritual and physically, and knew what to do in what stages and how to take advantage of that and guide humanity in a certain mental and basically I would say non-spiritual direction, because even to this point they have many different methods of suppressing people's ability to attune themselves to these other realms of existences and use them practically. So foreseeably, that would happen. The Earth native reptilians that exist on that home planet that harbored them will eventually return, but will not be the first to land here. This entire planet would become secured by the more powerful and capable reptilians until there is a for sure certainty that this is a safe zone, and the Earth native reptilians will be escorted back to their home, and they'll be able to breathe their own air again and exist under their own sun again and live and exist alongside the remaining humans, the non-human souls that assisted and still will play a part that exists as humans on the surface, will serve as a conduit between these beings, because the psychic and energetic presence of these beings are overwhelming to humans. If you would think of a psychedelic experience and how overwhelming that can be, just merely standing right beside one of these beings would produce that kind of effect. And that needs to be continued. They need to have a mediator so that humans can get used to coexisting with multiple reptilian beings, including the Earth natives.
So thank you for that answer, Drac'aar, and thank you for that question. We now have Rafi Caffey here for a question. No, he disappeared. We'll bring up Mortal Racer, if you can jump up here. Mortal, did you have a question for Drac'aar?
I kind of joined like in the middle, so like, could you kind of explain what you mean by reptilians in the War for Earth?
Reptilians and the what?
And the War for Earth, like, can you
and,
explain
yeah,
what the topic's about?
Of course he did. We've been talking for an hour, right? So, yes, he did explain that. He just missed it, but he's not going to re-explain what he already explained. Questions have to be about, what he said. So if you missed it, you don't really have a question.
No, okay,
but thank you. That's okay. No worries. Thank you for listening in. So let's see. We'll bring Rafi up here again. Rafi Cameron, if you wanted to ask a question, go ahead.
Hello.
Greetings.
Do you know if stingrays will be on the sides of the reptilians?
Who?
Stingrays.
Stingrays.
Rays. Like the animal that killed Erwin.
Like manta rays, but they got stingers. Yeah, he's wondering if they would be on the side of the reptilians, or are they unrelated to this?
It's something that's a subject I'm unfamiliar with, so
it's the organism that killed Erwin, and he was like the strongest human to ever live. So
those little, they look like little.
well, how is that? The creatures that exist here are Earth native as well. The only creatures that don't belong are the humans that were genetically created. I don't see why they would be for or against as natural existing beings or creatures. They would.
And can I ask one more quick question?
Yeah.
Who's the leader of the reptilians?
There is no the reptilians.
Oh. What do you mean by that?
That there are many. If you missed it in the beginning, there are many different reptilian races that, even beyond the alliance, that exist on many different planets in different forms. And there is no the reptilians. If you're talking about the alliance, that's an unrelated question.
And do you think obviously there are some reptilians that are stronger than others, like for example crocodiles, they're really going to take the throne here. Do you think that they would turn tail and turn on like the turtles? Because the turtle.
Sorry, I didn't mean to move you in mid question, but we're only going to be giving one question at a time. There's so many people waiting to ask questions.
How do I see that? I'm going to.
So do you want to keep taking questions, Drac'aar, or do you want to continue with the interview? Because we've got 7 people who want to talk right now.
And how much time has passed? 1 hour. Okay. I'll take
for
I'll take one more question.
All right, we're going to take one more question, then we're going to interview a little bit more, and then we will open it up for questions again. It looks to me like most of the people who want to ask questions were not here for the interview, though. So unfortunately, you can't really ask a question because you didn't really hear what was heard. So I'm going to go back to Sir Ben. Sir Ben, if you want to come up here, you did hear the podcast, so go ahead and ask a question.
I did, but this question was not for me. It was for a person who joined named Ghost. And I think this is still a good question for the podcast. And for her, the question was, what was their reason for creating us, the reptilian species, and like creation of man?
Reptilians did not create man. It is very the beings that created man, quote unquote, in the Bible, in his own image, were beings that used their own DNA. So they look very much like humans. They're the closest thing you could think of is probably the Anunnaki. But
That's what I was thinking of.
well, they're more or less more advanced humans, older, obviously, because they were birthing species genetically, artificially. So they themselves were more advanced technologically, spiritually, and much older, but were very human-like. They didn't have any tail. They didn't have scales, pale skin. They looked very much like humans, just very much to look taller, 10, maybe 12 feet tall, and that's subtle differences that aren't worth really getting into detail over.
Okay, well, thank you for answering that, and I'll let the ghost know. But with that, I'll hop out if you have any more questions you want to ask. Thank you again, Drac'aar.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So there's I want to ask a few more interview questions, but don't worry, we will be opening it up to audience again after another round of interview questions. This is going to be a long interview because I talked to Drac'aar and he has a hell of a lot to get into, and I'm going to pick his brain. So please listen and then formulate your questions based on what you actually hear rather than your preconceptions or whatever. So I was wondering, Drac'aar, we talked about the reptilian history of Earth. We talked about the war where the aliens came and destroyed the reptilians on Earth, how they genetically engineered humans, and how there's now kind of a conflict between the humans and the aliens the reptilians who've been displaced from this planet. But I wanted to talk to you about the government a little bit. Now, I know there's certain things that you don't want to talk about with regards to this for your own safety or whatever, and of course we respect that. So if you don't want to answer a question, just tell me. But I do want to ask you, what's the deal with the shadow government? And can you first of all explain a little bit about what is the shadow government? What's their connection to the reptilians?
Well, if you had missed it, they when I explained when humans were created, they created a separate human species. They are essentially us, created in the same fashion, but were meant specifically to take orders from the beings that created them to manipulate humans. They are spoon-fed technology bit by bit by bit, and they themselves also spoon-feed technology to surface humans at a giving orders by the there's a go between surface humans and the ones that created us, and they were specifically raised outside of the parameters of the surface of the planet. They were raised in space, like stations, and in ways so that they would be able to understand and learn. We're more advanced, and they were intended to be more advanced, so that they were able to understand their orders and raise humans in a specific fashion to their liking. Which, in my personal opinion, I still don't understand what they would do with Earth's current situation that would be advantageous to them, other than using humans as a genetic weapon physically. That theory is just a speculation of a possibility, a reason behind all of this, and what they're building with so many humans here on the planet, trashing the planet in the meantime. That somehow convincing surface humans to a large extent that their planet is at risk for being destroyed, like staging an entire event, bringing humans into very enclosed areas, which are actually ships, to be sent to other planets that they haven't dominated yet, armed with technology that's not theirs, so that there would be arriving thinking that their home planet Earth, which is not actually at risk, they were just deceived as such and sent to, like I said, this is speculation, sent to these other enemy territory planets that they haven't yet conquered, so that they can continue to spread. This is my only guess as to what they can possibly do with what they have here, because in my mind, it doesn't make sense, even with my current experience and understanding of things. Yeah, the shadow government currently, you can see them as a one world government already. They oversee the entire planet and how humans are raised. You can say that these countries and the governments and the conflicts they're all meant to happen. They would stop or not get in the middle themselves, the shadow government, and prevent things from happening. If they didn't want it to happen, it wouldn't happen. But they have to know about it first. So they have to remain aware, and their increase in surveillance technology on the surface of this planet is very much a way of securing their understanding of human growth at this point, and trying to get a handle on things, because they know we're approaching, and they want the utmost control and surveillance, so that they can make decisions as quickly and as efficiently as possible in times of war. Right now, the shadow government serves as the media, for example, keeping humans divided and separate from one another. And the one true aspect of this species we are in humanity, this humanity, is that we are disconnected. We are not connected beings. We even households of human families are disconnected from each other because of the way we're raised, the way things are, the systems that are in place, that are employed, had been implemented by the shadow government from the very beginning of the existence of these systems that had grew from what we would consider, 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, where religion more or less was the main way of dominating human understanding of reality and self. Now it's more scientific based and based on logic and understanding, and they had to adapt to that and control humans using different methods, starting from when in World War II theater and things like this were introduced by Hitler to convince their populace that certain types of people were bad, and it worked because it was information that reached many humans and convinced humans that that was true, and that was the main goal of that. But it had transformed when radios and televisions became more wide used, and people were becoming influenced by that, and newspapers and things that would display certain narratives in a manipulative way to make sure and make certain that humans were only exposed to certain informations, and the very concept of Republican versus Democrat on the news is one example of divide and conquer technique, and gender versus men versus women, black versus white, religion versus religion, All of these things are meant to keep humans at each other's throats, to mistrust each other, to not to be disconnected, but not have that willpower and strength and the means to change the way, not only the way they live, but the system itself, because it's impossible to change. To remain a connected species, self-sustain, and start existing like they should, the way their nature calls. Even as a genetically manipulated race, they are still living beings and have a growth pattern. Their shadow government pays close attention to that, and the media is going to be the main way when the war does go down, to try to convince humans of the opposite narrative. One thing I want to make clear is that the reason why you do internet searches on reptilian ETs and everything you could possibly read or pull up on YouTube or any sort of platform is almost always certainly going to be negative. Now I had run into a few things that were not completely negative, and there are conspiracies to blame reptilians for everything that's going wrong on this planet, which is the ironically and very sickly and disgustingly the exact opposite situation. So that's what the shadow government does. It oversees the growth of human.
Right. So thank you for giving us that introduction to the shadow government. Now I'm wondering, are you willing to get it all into your personal interactions with the shadow government?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and also the situation that you believe triggered this. Can I mention this as well?
Yeah, I think that's almost so critical and important, because certain people need to hear this. If they do, it could prevent them from potentially being noticed. Which I was originally not supposed to be noticed. I don't take orders. I don't know that I take orders. If you know what a sleeper cell is basically the concept of a sleeper cell. But I'm still my own being. I still grow, in like every other being, and I was never informed of my mission until it became obvious. And I did not know I was a soul of reptilian origin, despite my childhood and the many experiences that I had with reptilians. I still grew up thinking that I was just a human soul who had no reason to believe I was anything else but a human, that just had these experiences and were convincing enough for me to go down a certain path. But that just was not the case, because in 2014, I had a miraculous experience that showed me that, without a doubt, in my own understanding of what I know and what I don't know, that experience undoubtedly showed me that I'm truly a reptilian soul, and to not convince anyone else that is or isn't true. No one can tell me that isn't true, because that experience essentially proved it 100% without doubt, that I'm not a human soul. I'm of reptilian origin, of a specific collective reptilian origin, and I have limited information about my actual collective, and that's for my own safety. Too much knowledge given to me puts me at risk. I only know what I can know, and I'm allowed to speak about. For example, this podcast I agreed to.
Right. Well, I think we should dig into this. I think we should go the whole 9 yards and cover the whole story, because honestly, what you've said so far in 1 hour and 18 minutes has been very groundbreaking, and most of this will be information that people have not heard before, and yet we've only covered about 33% of your story. So I'd like to go all the way, but if at any point you want to say this is too sensitive or too dangerous for you, just let me know, and we'll edit it out or whatever you want. But my understanding is there was a personal experience that you had in your town. It took place close to a nuclear reactor, and you believe that the nuclear reactor's proximity played some role. Secondarily, you witnessed an airplane on fire, and that airplane was descending as though crashing. And then after that, your town reported a uncharacteristic earthquake, and you felt there might be some connection between that earthquake and the aircraft crash, and that many people saw this, but it was later censored. And you feel that you were eventually targeted to be silenced because of what you had seen and because of what you had videotaped. And that ultimately ended up in a tragic and very extreme act of physical violence against you in your own home, which caused you to lose most of the muscles in the leg of one of your legs. So I'd like to get into this. Can we start with when you saw
Let's
the...
start. Let's start.
Wherever you think. Wherever you think.
Let's start with where I was originally going to start with, and work it. It won't be as long as you think. It's we probably covered 50% of what most I want to say here in this podcast. And thank you everybody who's sticking around. I know this is long, and it's probably out of the bounds of your own comfort zone, because as I say, this is from my own experience. I trust in myself, my own experience, and took great care in making as much as possible to not allow outside influences to ever like hearsay. Someone says something and it makes sense, I won't just immediately believe it. Like many people who take on reptilian conspiracy theories and point hatred towards reptilians, they simply have no experience, but yet harbor these feelings for no good reason, no experiential reason. That's personal. That's all I want to say, is that experience dictates knowledge, not a YouTube video or a thread or a book or what someone has said. And this includes what I'm saying as well. Take it what you can, leave what you can, but what I'm saying here is merely hearsay. It's information that might help you and might help anybody who listens to it in the future. But what I'm going to start with is my reptilian self-discovery experience, because I had grown up not knowing I was a reptilian soul at all, and I didn't even know it was possible that I was anything other than a human at some point. But I had underwent a trauma for the better part of a year after that, my first out-of-the-body experience at 6 years old. The quick explanation is every night I would be removed from my body, placed into another body in which I could not control. Tints of red and beforehand, before actually being pulled from my body, would gain flash images of highlights of lives of animals and humans alike, singular in each experience. And I would drop down into their body and experience the last moments of their life, which was very violent, many sexual, violent, focus-oriented, very harmful and disturbing aspect of what humans are capable of in their darkness, to do to life for their own pleasure and benefit, for meaningless reasons that would make people very mad if I had went to detail into even one of these experiences. I was traumatized by it as a child, and growing up with these entities and experiencing them, they were my comfort zone. They were beings that I cared for, that they guided me and helped me understand what I was experiencing as I grew. But I had developed a deep, deep hatred for humans that was really, really, really strong. That remained inside of me until I had graduated high school. In between high school and going to college, I had an experience in the ethereal realm, where you're this complex realm of existence, and you're just in awareness, pushing yourself within a substance, and that is indescribably complex, geometrical shapes that are just like impossible to actually draw out, because they just colors that don't exist, in this realm. It's too complex. It's a completely like different realm of existence that can only be explained as the higher plane of existence, the ethereal realm. So I had merged. Long story short on that one, because that's a huge piece that I can go on about for a long time, because it was one of my most significant experiences that happened in 2011, I believe. I had merged with another, because I originally was just this ball of awareness, formless awareness, pushing myself along that substance, and there were distant objects, and one, I was just traveling along until one had attracted my attention, and I brought myself to it. As I got closer, I was getting indescribable feelings more and more. So as I got close, it's extended a piece of my awareness and entangled it with what it also did, which was send an extension of itself in this object. What it appeared as an object was actually an entity, which was also of reptilian origin, which in my eyes describes or explains my attraction to that particular spot. I had merged with this being temporarily, and throughout this merging, gained a lot of information about the things I experienced before, and what they meant, including my first outer body experience, whether there was any of them being manipulated, or whether there was any coercion or anything deceiving me. I got a lot of answers, a lot of questions answered, and things that bothered me throughout my life at that point. And at the very end of this very long and great experience with this being, merging being, where one being, our thoughts and feelings the same, what I think and feel in this reality being far more complex. You couldn't fit it into a day's worth of talking in a single second of information being conveyed. You have to access my human past lives, and I could not reach past my human past lives. There was some restriction, self-imposed restriction, that didn't allow me at the time to go past that point, which turned out to be because I had to overcome something first, which was my hatred towards humanity, which was guiding me towards a very dark path. I didn't know that at the time. At the end of the experience, I can only translate or convey that I had shown this being why I had this hatred, where it came from, and why it made sense, logical sense, to hate these creatures and what they were doing to themselves and to the planet. And to put it in simple terms, if it was a physical being, it would be like if you were standing by this being, and this being gave a smile and said, "My species doesn't hate any being or species for any reason," and had walked away. It was the end of my experience. I'd returned to my body. It got me to question my hatred, which I was really, really attached to. And that, like I said, this was in 2011. I decided not to go to college. I isolated myself for 3 years and worked on my hatred, which would be called shadow work, I suppose, or self-reflection. At that point, after that long period of time, I had managed to succeed to go back on the traumatic experiences, those torturous experiences I had mentioned, which fueled the hatred. I was triggered by many aspects of things. Just the word human before that merging experience, the word human, the human body, the bare human body, these things were all triggers to intense rage and hatred that would just emanate from me. It was true, what I would describe as this real true hatred. True hatred. And I decided to face it. I listened to the wisdom of the being. He didn't tell me I was wrong in my hatred. He simply responded with himself, his species, that they didn't hate. And I took that as I shouldn't hate. There's a flaw in my logic, and I went over it over and over again, and I couldn't find any flaws. There's many reasons to hate the human race at that point, with my experience, and I couldn't figure it out. But I worked on it. Like I said, isolated myself. I cut ties with all friends and acquaintances, and isolated myself for 3 years until I was able to actually go back on these traumatic experiences without being totally triggered, and eventually come to an understanding of why these terrible and meaningless deaths and experiences I had when I was young, they were actual animals and humans that had been tortured in this way. So that was explained to me by the being I merged with, that these were real existing beings. So that was something I already internally thought and knew, but I was glad to have that confirmation. I was eventually able to overcome that hatred completely, and it was 2014 summer, and a few months later, in November 2014, I had the experience that showed me that I'm a reptilian soul, and I'm not going to even go into that experience because it's unnecessary. How I discovered this with certainty after so many experiences. After that point, I had 3 years after that moment, 2014, of a perfect spiritual existence. Like everything made sense. All the reason why I experienced reptilian entities, my guardian being reptilian, my three affiliated other entities that had stuck by me from the very beginning. Why I had those types of experiences, and the love and care and compassion that I had towards reptilians that seemed to come from deep inside me, and rather than just experiences having convinced me of these feelings. The reason for this love and care was because I was of them. Not only was I'm in a human body, and I'm away from my family as a soul. There's a distinguishable difference between the existing as a human and where I'm from, and the love came from family-oriented feelings that come from my higher self or my soul. I things like that made sense, and I'll stop right there with the making sense things. But just imagine everything you experience from that point just falling in line, in order, and a scattered puzzle pieces, a puzzle with puzzle pieces scattered everywhere, had now became a clear picture of something that made complete and ultimate sense. You want to say something?
Well, no, I was just wondering, do you want to take a few questions? We got 2 people in the audience who want to ask a question, or do you want to continue with the interview?
Well, the next step is the introduction to the shadow government and how I got involved. So I would say yes, go ahead, ask some questions.
All right, so we're going to take 2 questions. We got Elijah and Intricate. I don't think either of you guys heard the whole interview, but nevertheless, we're going to bring up Elijah, see if he's got a good question for us. Elijah, go ahead and come up to the stage if you can. And Intricate will invite you as well. You guys have both been invited to speak. I'm sorry, there you go. Intricate, do you have a question for Mr. Drac'aar?
Yeah, man. Thanks for welcoming me onto the site here. I didn't fully realize it was like a Q&A thing, but interesting topic. I've had very similar experience to what you're describing, and actually almost identical in one case. Um, so when you met this reptilian being and they communicated with you, it was on like telepathic level. Did you see them in your physical form? Because one of them that I've seen came to me in physical form, and others that I've seen were in my uh, astral. I guess you call it an astral projected form. But they were different. Each one was different, and the one that was in human form basically just walked right up to me, and his eyes blinked in a way that human eyes won't blink. And he said in my mind, he said, "Yes, we're here." Something, something. It was almost like watch your back. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're here. We know that you know. This is a confirmation. And then that was it. And that was literally as I was checking myself into a rehab. So it was a
I think
weird.
this makes me.
That was the physical manifestation. Now the astral one out of my body was so much more intense, and I mean, I could go into that.
This is for questions, but I would ask you to confront me privately, because let's just say it's for your own safety, and you'll understand more when I complete. And
I would be out of line if I didn't say join the Roundtable Discord server where we discuss these kind of things all the time. So if you have these kind of experiences, we'd love to see you on the Roundtable Discord where we discuss these kind of issues at great detail. And then we'll be able to deal with your situation in more depth without derailing away from Drac'aar's narrative. So if you had a question, you can ask it. And if you have your own story, you could even be a guest on the podcast yourself sometime and tell.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
So sure, my question would be then. So I caught you. You said that you were a reptilian form or descendant. So
yes.
What leads you to believe that I would have to be, fearful of them? As if, I have something to worry about, which, I understand the...
because what I said before, I don't know if you were here, someone asked the question if they can detect, the shadow government detect those who aren't reptilian souls. And I mentioned that it has to do with reaching altered states that are impactful and have a certain level of influence on reality, and that they can pick up on using technology. I'm not certain of, but that's how I was unveiled. And,
okay, so it's like through a technological device.
Yes. Yes.
Interesting that you say.
Like a
all right.
If you have any experiences with aircraft, I'll get to that. But
no aircraft, man. Just other shit that.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a Q&A, and I don't want to take up any more time. I appreciate you even.
Throw me a PM.
All right, thank you, Intricate. Hope to see you on the round table. And Elijah, we're gonna open you up to questions now, my brother. Elijah, do you have a question for Drac'aar? Elijah, you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? Go on once. Go on twice.
Yeah. So I know, like, you're talking about sort of like reptilian descendants. So I'm just curious, is in your experience, do you know, are there like kind of like avian descendants, or are there any kind of like fish descendants, or is it purely just reptile?
There are multiple species that volunteer to help with the earthly situation. most of which are reptilian because, well, it's just like it's sort of like an inherent love towards, even if they're of another species, really can like empathize with the pain of losing your home in that way and watching your entire species almost go extinct. But there are definitely other parts of the Alliance that are not reptilian that serve as the similar circumstances are placed strategically in certain human bodies and existences, and so the answer is yes. There's others.
And one other thing that I was just wondering about, I don't know if you mentioned it earlier, because I wasn't here for the whole thing. So, and this might be kind of like I don't know, a dumb question, but so if you're like a descendant, if there's like a descendants of like reptiles, does that mean like dinosaurs play into that too? Like as an ancient ancestors?
Dinosaurs?
Yeah, I think he's asking like were the reptilians who existed on this planet related to the dinosaurs? So is it that the dinosaurs evolved?
Yeah. No, I don't have a clear answer to that, but that there was it was around the existence, I believe, and I can't answer this with certainty, but it was around, yes, the existence of dinosaurs where these intelligent reptilians did exist and did not, they weren't like attacked and annihilated by giant, these dinosaurs we speak of may not be what you would think is just giant animalistic creatures, and that there may be some misjudgments on paleontology, I think they call it. Yeah, around that time, definitely coexistence with the intelligent reptilian races, but the native reptilians of Earth, they existed here for a very long time before this tragedy had occurred to them. That's why they had the technology and to escape by the skin of their teeth with small numbers and stay alive.
So thank you for your question, Elijah, and thank you for answering the card. Did you have one last thing to say, Elijah?
No, I was just going to say thanks for the insight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Elijah. So I think we've taken a few more. We've now had 2 rounds of questions and answers. I think we should continue with one final round of interview, and then we'll do one final round of question and answer, if that's all right.
Sounds perfect.
So again, I was wondering if you wanted to get more into detail of this whole saga about the crashing airplane, the earthquake, and then the physical assault and targeting that you experienced when you were being silent as a result of this whistleblowing.
I'm going to not talk about that particular event because it's irrelevant to. It's not connected. I'm not sure if it's connected because I don't know what craft had actually been shot down, and I want to not exactly broadcast my physical location. But yes, I do. I live next to a nuclear power plant, and it's used occasionally to manufacture weapons-grade plutonium for nuclear warheads and things of that nature. It's I don't even live like my physical proximity where I'm sitting right now is not even a full mile to the nuclear plant physically. Very, very close to it, and that's not a coincidence. My physical location having been moved here 8 or 9 years ago from my house, where I was originally living. My parents had went bankrupt and had to buy a house, and this house was just like it fell into their lap. And in fact, I discussed this with my father just recently, and how strange it was how this house became available for such a cheap price at the very last minute when we were about to like become homeless. Packed our bags in the middle of a snowstorm and ended up here. So that 100% was not a coincidence. And the next part of my what I have to say in this in all of this will make this make more sense to you. But that was your question, right, Shogun? Like, sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you wanted to get into the more personal details of the persecution that you suffered at the hands of the shadow government. But if you don't want to touch on that, we don't have to.
I don't want to touch on that because it was the very reason of intending to publicize it and make this reach multiple years that got me into that position to begin with. So I don't want to make the same mistake twice, if you get me.
I certainly do. So that being said, I think you've given us a hell of a lot of great information today that we weren't likely to get anywhere else, and I'm grateful for that. Also, we had some great questions today, so thank you for the good questions.
Wait, are we done?
Well, we don't have to be done, but my question then is, what else would you like to get into?
Well, no, I didn't want to explain that particular that cover-up event that you referred to. I wanted to get into how the shadow government got involved in my life and how that it turned my life upside down and got me to start embarking on what I was truly meant to be here for. That's the next segment I want to cover. So
let's do it.
Okay. So after I in 2014 discovered my reptilian origins and soul, I had 3 years, best years of my life, of what would be the kind of life a regular spiritualist would want in trying to meditate, eat right, and reach altered states of a variety of kinds, and use those for practical reasons to understand more about reality and myself, and just keep learning and learning through experiences in altered states over and over again, and through determination. 3 years of nothing but pleasant experiences, including the occasional psychedelic experience, which undeniably helped me as well in my spiritual evolution. But one experience 3 years later after that discovery was an experience that had brought the shadow government's attention to me. And this is me and my brother had went into a location around 10 miles north of this nuclear power plant. I believe that this is relevant, the nearby location and how they responded. We went there specifically to reach a higher state. We practiced together for quite a bit. This experience, I had reached a state of awareness so aware, so expanded. I've never reached a higher state of awareness anywhere close or near like this before in my life, even to this day. The most aware I have ever been. And what I'm referring to is that I could actually extend my awareness anywhere I wanted. My energy field had expanded for what seemed like miles. I could feel everything around me, the birds, every bird that was flying in my vicinity. This was at the corner of a road, a 20 by 20 acre field that me and my brother just took a blanket and sat down and endured this experience. It was a great experience. It was a great build up, and I was just going up, 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 up as far as the awareness goes. And I could feel the every leaf that was rustling in the wind. I could feel the trees and the textures without touching them. I could feel for miles people on roads that were nearby, even though we were in the center of a large field and we had nobody was watching any. There was nothing nowhere. It was basically in the middle of the woods. A small patch of woods with trees surrounding us, but we were in an open plain area. And at one point, I had asked my brother, who had been sitting in one spot for a long time, to come closer to me, and to lay down on our backs and look at the skies and enjoy the scenery of the skies. That I reached a state that was like I thought that was it. That was my state. That's where I want to be. And I'm not sure if this is relevant, but I'm going to include it right quick. And then when I looked into the sky, it looked great, but there was one chemtrail that was right above me. And I said, it kind of was like a little bit of a disappointer seeing it, and I wanted to do something about it. And I remembered through an experience when I was younger, I was shown races of beings that were able to manipulate reality on a level of which they were able to use their the ability to combine and separate compounds and particles into simple elements that were harmless, or just basically perform alchemy in a magical sense, manipulate particles. So I had projected my awareness into the sky. I was actually like maybe by location it would be more accurate in this essence, because I was up there. I was in the middle of the chemtrail cloud, and I could see all these particles flying chaotically in all these different directions. And I tried to make what was seemingly toxic to me and not good to. And I didn't even know what it was. I just seen these tiny particles just flying everywhere. I'm way up there in the sky, by the way, way up there, and tried to use that technique. It didn't work. I doubt I did anything there. I returned to my body and I kept laying there. And me and my brother start hearing this chopping sound. I'm still in this great peaceful awareness state, and I feel things for miles. I mean, it's just great, wonderful. And this chopping sound we thought was a go-kart or a four-wheeler, because there were trails in this large field area that we know that people use it to just ride around in their go-karts or whatever it is, or dirt bikes, and they weren't going to disturb us because we were in an area that wouldn't intrude or on anything like that. But this chopping noise was getting louder and louder and closer, and very, very fast. This sound was getting closer. And I could feel the threatening, dark, terrible energy approaching me as this chopping was getting louder. And it had, in essence, penetrated my expanded energetic field, and I was able to feel what was approaching. In that instance, my higher self had taken over my body completely. I was no longer me. I was my real self, embodied in this human body. And though as unbelievable as this might sound to some, this is what truly happened. My brother is my witness. I stood up. I jumped up on my feet like Jackie Chan, because I was laying on my back, just jumped up on my feet, but I'm like extra serious. My higher self knew what was approaching, knew why it was approaching, knew what was going on. He knew everything at that moment, but what was coming wasn't even envisioned yet, because there was a ditch with tall cattails that was sort of blocking the where it was coming from, and it was getting really, 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 really loud. I stood there with fortitude and confidence and this ultimate strength was coursing through me. And what had appeared when it came in vision was a all black, unmarked black Apache attack helicopter that was fully loaded with like guns on the sides and one of those 30 millimeter rail cannons, or I don't know what they're called, but they shoot 30 millimeter bullets. It's like a long rod that sticks out the bottom of the helicopter. It had stopped mid-flight, and now my brother is meters away from me on his own blanket in his own area. I'm standing, and right when it came into vision, I had extended my hand, my palm of my hand, and focused and honed in where it had stopped, like stationary. And I had focused. I had this increased focus. My senses were increased to a huge degree. I had focused on an area beneath the helicopter. Now, remember, I'm not making these decisions. This is higher self. And I pulled out some type of psychic technique, some psychic warfare technique that truly actually scares me because of the power I felt from it. I had used my vision with my palms to my hand extending out. I had used my vision somehow to focus on this tiny, tiny spot, no bigger than the head of a pin, probably even smaller, underneath this death machine. And what had appeared was basically like a kind of rift opened up. It felt like I had pierced reality and opened up some kind of portal or rift, but it was visual distortions and a clear inward and outward colors and ripples that were coming out from it. I was using my hand guiding this thing. It started to rotate around me. And this thing was flying so low to the ground that the blades of the helicopter pounding my chest had anybody else would shit their pants and run, let's just say that, because that weapon on the bottom was pointing right at me, not my brother the whole time. My brother was freaking out, not knowing or understanding what was going on. He's my older brother by 7 years, my senior. And this thing slowly rotated around us, and it carried that scent, that energy of death and destruction. It was there with the intent to destroy. And I don't know what I was doing. Even to this day, I really don't know what technique I was using or how I did it, where it came from, other than higher self's personal knowledge throughout many existences in the past. Perhaps in my reptilian body, I could perform these types of reality manipulation techniques. I'm not sure, but it was a really powerful technique. I stood there as if I could face this thing, and no rational man would stand in front of this type of death machine with guns pointed at you, with no weapons by his side. And he extended his hand, expecting that he would be able to do something about this the most intimidating aircraft, specifically an attack helicopter, to my destination to rotate and observe around me, which is called a show of force. If anybody knows anything about the Air Force, when they send a helicopter like that to a place, it's either a show of force or an all-out assault, which means they gun them down or to a method of intimidation. But this here, I think, was a confusion. That's speculation, because I don't know what they were thinking, and I had no clue that they would be able to had the ability to pick up on higher aware states, or that they were even concerned about such things. I wasn't into conspiracy theories. I didn't know what shadow government was. I heard people talking about Illuminati. I was uninterested because I had never been ever interested in those topics. Those weren't available to me in my experience yet. That was my first encounter. This is my first encounter with the shadow government, as far as I know. And while this thing rotated around me, the outside of this rift that I was using my hand to keep poised underneath this chopper, I could feel the people in there. They could feel their fear. I could feel that I could sense a hand on a trigger, wanting desperately out of fear of just his own life to hit the trigger of what weapon was pointed at me. It's not unsimilar to the WikiLeaks collateral war or collateral damage video, that helicopter that was used to gun down 32 people in Iraq. You could look that up on WikiLeaks. It was that type of helicopter. Something you would only see on a battlefield. And it was 2:30 in the afternoon on a school day when COVID wasn't around. So they rocked the entire neighborhood with this very, very loud. It was so close to us, it was actually kicking up wind, and no fear. I had no fear. Higher self stood there like he does this every day and did this many times. Whipped out this technique out of nowhere. What appeared to me to be translucent tentacle-like structures that were like see-through had extended out of this portal and wrapped around, three-pronged, like around the helicopter. And at that moment, I felt like that thing was in the palm of my hands like a toy. I was about to finish whatever technique that was, which was undoubtedly intended to get rid of this threat that was rotating around me. I had one of my affiliated entities from when I was young that I trust very much had caught my attention, as if someone would tap on the back of your shoulder to get your attention. But I couldn't really move my eyes, or I had to keep paying attention. But what was communicated to me through thoughts and feelings could be translated into the words "not yet." And so, with hesitation, I was about to complete and cast whatever I was going to do, and at the last minute decided to dispel that technique, whatever I was doing. The portal had basically sucked into itself and disappeared along with the extensions that wrapped around the helicopter. My hand had received a backlash as if I was holding an explosive in my hand, and it blew up. My hand flew behind my back, like impact. My hand flew behind me, and it was as if it almost dislocated my shoulder. But I stood there with confidence, still higher self present in my body, and just watched as this thing continued its rotation around me with its weapons pointed at me. At that point, after it completed a full rotation, it inclined in altitude and speed and fled south, the opposite direction of which it came in high speeds. I stood there, continued watching until it dissipated into a black dot, and then higher self had just instantly left my body, and fear started to set in. The person you're talking to now, my conscious human self, my human awareness, this body was awareness, not higher self gone. That all the fear that I should have felt when the thing arrived and posed so much of a threat started to settle in. I started to shake and knew what it was about, because that knowledge had not left me. I knew this had to do with my reptilian origins. I knew that something had occurred, and now I caught the attention of a very strong force that was able to dispatch that type of death machine over U.S. territory so diligently. In fact, I still don't know what technology they would use to pick up on these things. Perhaps electromagnetic frequencies, whatever. Anyway, I went to my brother and spoke to him about it, and that was after we had returned home. I was paranoid like crazy, filled with fear. Watching behind in the back seat, seeing if someone was following us. Spent the next 3 weeks in my house, scared that someone's going to kick down my front door, and people in fucking black suits are going to fucking drag me out my goddamn house. And I, those entities who told me that I would be tortured or captured for information purposes to try to get information out of me. Those were warnings I got when I was young that I didn't take too seriously until that moment, or those moments in my life. It didn't happen. Nothing happened at that point, and I started to relax and continue my life, but not without change. Anytime I meditated after that point and reached a significant altered state at my house or anywhere, I would be approached by UAVs that would sweep over me repeatedly. Drone helicopters that weren't as intimidating. I've never been from that point on, never been approached by anything that intimidating ever again. And my speculation is that they had thought an actual ET being was on the surface of the planet at that point because of the amount of a physical, non-physical influence I was exerting at that point, that they somehow are able to pick up on it and identify it as that only a non-human of a great psychic ability could have that much influence on reality. And I believe that they sent that thing with so much intent on force and death, the energy of death emanating and threat, because they were expecting something like that. But I was just a human standing there with my palm out. I'm not. I think that if they had known what that technique was and what it could do, because I truly believe I could have done something there. And if I had completed that technique, that I would have been captured. I would have been. I wouldn't be here today. But that was my first encounter with the shadow government. Since then to now, I've had over 200 aerial encounters with them. This extends up to the surveillance that was placed upon me. Living next to the nuclear power plant, this was not a coincidence, again, because I was not aware of what my mission was at the time. It became more clear as things continued to occur that I was meant to act as bait to bring them out and test what they could currently detect in that aspect of psychic or non-physical ability affecting the physical. I was basically bait. And I served that purpose again in 2019, where I got tired of the surveillance and the interruptions of my meditations, because I wanted to continue to grow and evolve like I was. And I spent years, with gang stalking events happening to me, being stalked, and the aircraft shit was actually probably the most unnerving. And I basically got angry and wanted to open a dialogue with these individuals. And I wanted to do that using the only way I knew how, which was to intentionally reach these altered states and provoke a response from them, and continuously do so in a sensitive zone closer to the nuclear plant, so that they would respond more diligently. And I did this over the course of less than a month. And this is early August 2019. I have text records in Discord actually around this time with someone who's in the audience right now between me and him. But if anybody is aware of those triangle-shaped UFO pyramid-looking crafts, those are operated by the shadow government. That pattern that people refer to is just plans that they've improved on that patent, and it's got a lot more technology, unfamiliar technology to any of us on it. In any case, I would go out on the back road, get close to the nuclear plant, then sit down with my Japanese katana and meditate, reach altered states, and intentionally try to provoke a response at like 2, 3 in the morning. Really, really inconvenient times to fuck with them. Eventually, I knew I was going to get approached eventually, because I was posing a problem. I knew they were gonna do something. I just didn't know what. And all I was doing was trying to open a dialogue and basically tell them to stop hiding in the bushes and using their binoculars, metaphorically speaking, and to just come out and I recognize that you're surveilling me, and you recognize that I recognize that you're surveilling me. Why don't we talk about it? And I knew that was a mistake, but I was tired of going through what I was going through. It was affecting my family negatively. The surveillance technology they were using, it was impacting my entire family. My mom started to get sick. My dad, he started to become less active and less like himself. Started drinking, and it broke down ever since the 2017 event. Started breaking down my family little by little, just because of them surveilling and targeting specifically me. But that day in 2019, early August, and then I'm approaching the end of all this. No, I seen two bright lights in the distance over what is a nearby lake, and it's not unusual to see unusual craft in this airspace. You see shit like that all around here all the time. It's no big deal. I sat there and watched as two bright lights were floating, approaching side by side and approaching from west towards me. The lake being east, where I was at, and so was the nuclear plant, but more northeast. They were approaching. I wasn't surprised, nor it was not unusual. They were just bright lights. We couldn't really see any kind of craft behind those lights, but they had stopped midair. And I have a perception, especially when I'm reaching high, and when I'm in a higher state, I have a perception ability where I'm able to feel when I'm being perceived. And I knew that when they stopped like that, they had picked up I was sitting there watching. And I was just said out loud, out of randomness, "What are you looking at?" And they just paused there for another maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, then continued to move in my direction, floated over me, and that was it. I said, shrugged my shoulders and say, "Okay, I don't know what that was about. Whatever, I'm going to continue to sit here and meditate." And then I felt an even stronger perception presence, only this time from above. I look above, and what it looked like just a normal star was like a blue star was moving and had placed itself directly above me. I look up and see it before it actually got to do that. So I seen it moving before it had stopped. I knew something was there. I spoke out loud and I said, "Am I supposed to feel?" And I didn't know anything could actually hear me. I'm just doing this. I said, "Am I supposed to feel comfortable with you poised right above me?" I said those words. And it started doing like these zigzag shapes in the sky. It was clearly something fucking else. It was not a star making these zigzags in the sky. I had started to become uncomfortable. I didn't know what was happening. I thought if I was going to be approached, it'd be by someone from the ground. I had gotten up from my spot, and clearly it was hearing me. It was responding to what I was saying, but not in any coherent way that I could make out. I got up with my katana and I said, "If you wish to continue this conversation, meet me in my front yard." And I took off on my feet, running as fast as I can to my to the vegetation that leads to the backyard of my home that faces west. When I get there, where's Shogun? Okay, I'm gonna continue because it's still being on record. When I get there, the triangle the triangle craft, the pyramid-shaped craft was above me. It had. Okay, Shogun. Are you there? Shogun?
I'd say continue, Drac'aar.
Okay. I'm just making sure everything's all good. So, yeah, it had descended. By the time I had gotten to my front yard, it had followed and descended. It was a solid triangle craft with a blue aura around it, and it descended quite close. I started talking because it was clearly listening to me from the beginning. I was making shapes and with its crafts, trying to communicate things to me, but I did not pick up on anything. I tried to guess what it was saying, but there was no way to confirm whether that was what it was trying to convey or not. So I said, to make things easier, move left and back to center for a yes, and right and back to center for a no. I'm going to make this a little short because this was I had experienced this craft over the course of 3 days. I had tested to see if it could hear what was in my mind. When I said, "Can you hear me now?" out loud, "Can you hear me?" it responded with a yes. When I said in my mind, without saying a word, "Can you hear me now?" it had responded the same way and said yes. And that's when I realized that this wasn't telepathy of any kind. This was some kind of technology tapping into what I was thinking. And red flags have been thrown up. I kind of felt at ease despite that. So I skipping all the boring stuff because I was actually just having fun communicating with this thing. It was actually pretty spectacular. No lie, it was pretty amazing to see what it was doing. Like the shapes and the colors that was using. Well, not the colors, the clouds. It was moving clouds and making structured patterns to try to communicate certain things. So that it was quite intricate, and I was impressed. But drones that normally surveil the nuclear airspace at night, that are usually far up in the sky, had descended, and they look like tiny little airplanes, like passenger planes, but they're tinier, they're smaller, and they are silent. They don't have like any noise. They approach the one after the other and turn on a large bright light that covered. You couldn't see the craft. The light was so bright, it looked like a giant fireball. And I eventually found myself surrounded by 7 of these drones. My house, me, at my driveway, laying down on my back because my neck was hurting, looking up and communicating at this thing. I was laying on my back. And eventually 2 red-lighted UFOs from the west had appeared. The drones had dissipated their lights. I seen like a physical transformation of the drone into back, like it transformed into something like back into its plane state, where it arrived as just a little plane. I believe, I can only speculate that those lights were there to hide the whatever it turned into when it turned on those lights, because I seen the physical shift. The drones dissipated. The triangle craft took off in 2 red-lighted UFOs, which I believe to be the actual nuclear security responding to this craft being so close to the power plant. They were very large red-lighted craft, really big, like extravagantly big. If you can imagine a tire, like a balloon, or the tire inflatable that kids use in pools and wave pools and stuff to keep themselves afloat. It was shaped like that, large, thick tire balloon. They had a spotlight on the front of it, and they shined it from a distance. It was pretty far away still, right at me, and even from that distance, it was actually hurting my eyes because it was so bright. So I'm looking away, and not. They just did that, and then they started heading south from that west position, and then that was it. The craft had came back, only in the form of a star. I said, "Do you wish to take me?" It said yes, and of course I say take in meaning of abductions. I've never been abducted in my life, by the way. I had no experiences of that matter. I said, well, I have to have some questions answered first if I'm going to agree to this. First, I asked what they were. And I listed a few things. Gray aliens, I said, say the reticuli. Are you this? I forgot what I might have said the second time, but on the third time, I said, well, you understand the English language because that's what I'm speaking. So you either are human or you're familiar enough with humans to know the language. And before I could finish that sentence, that I had already said yes to that first statement that they're humans. They claim themselves to be humans. I'm like, what, just regular us humans? And they said no. I'm like, what, humans from elsewhere? And they said yes. Now, whatever that means, I don't know. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I do know. I already explained that with the shadow government being separate from humans to be a conduit to the ETs that invaded the planet originally. Anyway, so asked another question. I said, are you on good terms with reptilian beings? And it gave an emotionally charged movement, like I felt an energy of like a negative energy, and it moved and said no. I'm like, huh, okay. I'm like, I said what I probably shouldn't have said, but I did it anyway. I said, well, I'm affiliated with reptilians. Is that going to be a problem? And of course it lied and said no. I didn't believe it, but I agreed to the abduction anyway because at that point I was in a position where I was giving it respect. I had a way. I could have pulled out a recorder. I could have pulled out, went in the house, and tried to do what normal humans would do, and try to, I'm going to record it and put it on YouTube. And no, I was giving it the respect, trying to show respect, give it to get it type mindset. And went into my home as instructed, and laid in my bed, and they had casted some technology on me that it could only be described as buzzing, like a loud motor buzzing. Everything was starting to get dark or monotone in color, and my peripheral vision was squeezing into like a tunnel vision, looked like if you were looking from the bottom of a well. So the noise was like, and my peripheral vision kept expanding and contracting smaller and smaller and smaller. And all of a sudden it stopped. I was wondering what the hell. Nothing happened. Truly, I don't know what that was, other than that the experiences I've had after that was different. And it could be attributed to what they did there. But when I ran outside, after sitting there a couple more minutes, my iguana had literally freaked out in the middle of the night and ran off the bed that he was sleeping on with me. And if you know anything about anybody knows anything about iguanas, they don't, when they're sleeping in the dark, for them to get up and run and like charge off the bed, they had to have felt something, I don't know, threatening or intimidating. I went up and got outside, and those 2 red lighted UFOs were back. I assumed that they chased that thing off again. And I'm wondering to myself why nuclear security doesn't just blows this thing out of the sky. Like, wouldn't that be anyone else's reaction if you had responsibility to defend something sensitive like a nuclear plant, that something foreign was that close to the plant, that just, shoot and ask questions later. But they didn't, because of the ties and the protocols the federal government has on these quote unquote UFOs, which are humans apparently. I get more confirmations on that later on in life. But I think I'm going to conclude this podcast by saying the next following 2 years, I had involved a friend, got many more aerial experiences. They increased their surveillance tenfold. To this day, it still occurs. The people around me, I started having visual. They were communicating to me with illusions. Anytime I looked at a star, or it would move in communicating directions. I won't bother to describe the next 2 days, because I actually had tried getting on my roof and following instructions to actually still try to comply and get abducted. And they had me get into the fetal position on my own roof through instructions, and they kept having me, you have to squeeze in tighter. They made the body, like the shape of a body in the sky. I had to squeeze my legs tighter, straighten my back tighter. They were like squeezing me into a ball, and I was fucking really hurting after hours of trying this, because every time I moved a little bit or I wasn't fitting in the right spot, it would just stop. And then they'd have to restart it. And every time they started it, it was the same thing, that same noise, and the same thing. They tried doing it behind a tree at one point, and tree branches were effectively just falling off this tree. At that point, I was kind of wondering, like, man, am I being like blasted with radiation that's gonna like kill me and give me cancer? Because I'm watching those branches fall off and make a perfect circle of fallen branches through the tree. It was kind of impeccable. I was questioning my safety at that point. Anyway, so that continued for 3 days. It changed its instructions to want me to bilocate to them. I disagree, because my friend that I said who is in the audience is he convinced me to stop cooperating. When I visited him that year in 2019 for 10 days, they had started targeting him. And anybody I was around would experience the same thing. When they looked at a star, it would start to move in these particular directions and patterns that I would be able to point out. But both persons would be seeing different things. And only people, like when my mom, my dad, my cousin, my brother, and everything, they would see this only when I'm around them. However, I had to travel to see my friend during that time, New Year's of 2019, before it hit 2020. And when I left after that 10 days, I was hoping, that that my friend wouldn't have anything to do with this. I was just there to visit him. And that they would leave him alone. But they didn't. They continued to try to communicate with him using the same methods and targeted him with similar but probably less severe surveillance. And to this day, he's still targeted by the same technology. I'm going to cut this short because it is getting rather extraneous. to continue, but they could hear what's in my own thoughts displayed on that day when that craft that appeared over my house. They're using that same technology to other technology to monitor me through my walls. They could see me when I go to the bathroom, and that's why Mr. NSA, our friend here, NSA, watches me jack off. That is a really funny to me because that's how I felt. Like I had no moment of privacy whatsoever. I couldn't take a shit without them watching, and it became years later, and now to this day, now my dad and my mom are completely freaked because I provoked them many times and intentionally just to fuck with them. I started hating that they did, were involving my friends. Just, it really got grotesque to me. So I would intentionally reach these higher states just to fucking make them spend the time and gas and attention to send UAVs over me repeatedly. And I just kind of had fun with it. And just recently, it wasn't so much fun anymore because I had played them hard, knowing that they were monitoring my electronic devices, said keywords that the NSA notices and understands to be hot words like nuclear plan, I'm going to die, extreme words. But I was saying it to random people over Discord in the middle of the night, and I had planned to reach, use what I know. With the assistance of a substance, actually, to reach a higher state of awareness, which I knew would work. It was a for sure way of working. I did have a plan that didn't exactly work out as I wanted to, but they were on me hardcore. Where my dad would run out the house and asking what the fuck is going on because they kept sending actual helicopters over the house repeatedly, like every 5 minutes. And buzzing and moving to the side, drones coming over, moving to the side, facing our direction and shit. And my dad's like literally fucking shaking at the knees at that point. So this is not just a thing that I experience alone. There's this like people are experiencing this around me. I probably would have eventually thought I was insane if I had no witnesses to these things, that I had gone insane. But it became apparent that I was supposed to lure these guys out of the woodworks. My entire existence was for intel gathering, reconnaissance, and obviously the infiltration part. Being born here and guided to that direction was more of like a divine way of things, learning things that had to happen in that order. And now, like I said to my friend, and to this day, my friend still being targeted by them, or rather surveilled, and not no more than 2 months ago. This is where it gets a little depressing. That day I provoked them with that plan. They were pissed. They were very angry at me. And at the end of the day, during sundown, they had deployed one of them red UFOs in one spot west over farmland that's empty, and it was shining. It was these red lights, one light on top and two on the two bottom corners, and it was emanating an energy I felt that was just like anger. They were pissed that I wasted their time. They thought I was planning something big, and that I wasn't aware that they were here listening on my conversation last night, that was also a part of the lure, and totally fucked with their heads on that one. But they were pissed. They wasted a lot of manpower and attention that could have been used elsewhere. Money, whatever, resources. They were pissed. Like they knew they got fucked with hardcore. And although I only heard about this a month and 14 days later, unfortunately, 2 days later, after my birthday, that was my birthday, my friend, one of my only two friends at the time, very close friend that I love very dearly. I loved him a lot. He supposedly committed suicide. I'm not quite sure of the full details. I think he jumped off the roof of a building that he worked at in construction. I spent 2 days or 3 days in the hospital. I think his death date was on July 4th. June 4th. My birthday's May 30th. And so the response to that wasn't to do something bad to me, but take something I love dearly away from me. And that affects that made me. That's the very reason why I even come up into this podcast and even start talking about things like this openly in a setting where others are going to hear this, because it's gotten to the point where people are dying. I'm going to stop it at that point now, because that's really where it ends. We're only 2 months ahead. I can take questions now.
So, can you hear me, first of all, Drac'aar?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So thank you so much. You walked us through so much, 2 hours and a half of great information. Do you want to take some questions before we close up?
Absolutely.
All right. So anybody wants to ask a question, this will be your final chance for this episode. I just want to remind you, join the Roundtable Discord server. We do these podcasts every day at 8. This has been an epic episode. We're going to close up with a final Q&A session here. I know a lot of you guys missed the whole podcast, but nevertheless, we're going to take your questions. We'll start with Sir Ben once again, since he's been here since the beginning. So, Sir Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for letting me back on. So my question is in regards to how you were attacked by these people, these potential government entities, and so after going through that and thankfully healing now and hopefully getting better quickly and quicker sooner than later, what do you think that you'll do for the future? Like, you know that you are now very likely, or at least very potentially, on their watch list or so, and that they may be actively like hunting you. Is something you would do to try to either escape that or just fight against it, or
No, the moment that they sent that helicopter to me and I was discovered, that the words "death sentence" was basically painted on my forehead. I'm basically a self-sacrifice for intel gathering, and everything I experience in this body is information that is sent back to my affiliates. Those are things. The reactions I was receiving by baiting them to me was this vital information that we needed to understand how and in what ways do they respond to these things on the surface of the planet. So your question was there's no escape. They can right now at the press of the button, which I'm still speculating on why I hadn't been killed long ago. Why am I not dead yet? I don't know. I have no reason to think that I could ever escape with the kind of surveillance that tracks me all the way to where I met my friend across the United States, and they followed me. You know, the UAV surveillance increase and all that stuff, but that all followed. No, there's no escape. I think that right now, if they wanted to, they could just microwave my brain and turn it into scrambled eggs. But they're keeping me alive for a reason, and my only rationale is that they're observing my behavior, and perhaps came across in the past someone like myself who had been unveiled and tried their really, really fucked up torture techniques to try to gather intel, and realized that nothing that they knew could ever be of use to them because the things that they're not supposed to know are not known. I can't know information that would compromise our mission here as the Alliance. If I know it, then I'm able to say it and speak it. There's no limit to what I could say in that regard. I mean, I do have choices, but these events were all like meant to happen.
All right. Well, thanks for answering my question again. And maybe I'll ask you more about it later. But for now, a lot of other people with questions, so I'll bounce out myself.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate it. So we got Porridge here. Porridge,
Thank you. So, I only tuned in for like the last few minutes of your podcast, but it was really interesting. So, I'm actually the manager of the Alliance.
All right. Well, we appreciate your questions, but if you didn't hear, the podcast, it might be hard. But we'll see who else is up. So let's bring up Epic Waffles. We've seen you before. Come on up, Epic Waffles. What's your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I was curious, do reptilians actually have the do the thing of the child sacrifices of the adrenochrome?
As far as I know, reptilians don't physically exist on the surface of this planet.
All right, but do you think they'll ever come here or like attack us?
If you weren't here for the whole podcast, I'm sorry, but I could simply answer that they're here to. If you want a good future, you would want to root for them to win this war, because that is the only bright future surface humans have. Is for a.
But why not any other alien races? There are a lot other stronger ones than the reptilians. Like the Anunnaki.
I'm talking. Okay, there. First of all, it's an alliance of beings, very large alliance of beings, and you weren't here for that explanation, so I'm not going to re-explain to you. I'll not right now. We can talk later about it if you like.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's hard because this has been a 2 hours and 40-minute podcast, and a lot of you guys came in later, but you still have questions. So entirely up to you, Drac'aar, if you want to field these questions or not.
Yeah. And I also want to say that to the person who's my friend, who's inside this chat right now, and give him a choice. If he wants to step up or say anything, and if he wants to, and if you're not familiar with the stage text, you can click the raise your hand button on the bottom of your screen.
Just hit the little hand wave and let us know you want to speak, and or if you want to choose a particular person to come up, let me bring them up.
Blisk here, he's the friend I was mentioning repeatedly.
Blisk? Yeah, Blisk. We know Blisk. Welcome, Blisk. Come on up to the stage. Ask your question.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
He's the friend that got involved in this.
Good.
I don't have any questions, but there's some things I can add from my own experience of this event. The only one that really comes to my mind at the moment is this sort of like my perspective of those moving star things. One thing that Marcus didn't mention is that if I stare at this thing at the night sky for long enough to like focus on them, it gives me a headache that is not too dissimilar to the headaches I get if I stare at a computer screen for way too long, except with the stars in the sky, it's much faster acting. By about like only a few minutes for that headache to take effect. And also there's some moments where the illusion, whatever, of the stars moving seems to take a much faster effect. So like sometimes I have to stare at it for longer to do it do it, for it to do it. Other times, it could just be a glance and they'll immediately start up, which leads me to believe that potentially uh, there may be some method of manual control.
Yeah, the switch between AI control and manual control, or someone is actively there for like expecting and hoping that me or him would come out, because I experienced the same thing, and we're in totally different parts of the country, where they're ready and they want you to like look up and see them, and they immediately start moving. They don't have any delay. And you can tell by when you ask them questions, they still follow the direction from when they first actually encountered me, to say yes or no by moving left back to center to say yes, and right and back to center for no. And that's also how you could tell if there's an actual person behind there operating it or an AI.
Of course, quite a while ago, I decided just to start ignoring the stars entirely, mostly because, well, not really much for me to gain, for me to essentially have a silly yes and no conversation of these things, like talking to a magic freaking 8-ball. And also freaking gives me a headache.
So we've been going for 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is fantastic, and we still have 5 questions to go. So Dawson's suggestion, which I agree with, is we bring those 5 members up in rapid fire format. We answer the questions quickly, and then conclude the podcast as a 3-hour podcast. Does that sound fair?
Yes, it does. Thank you for coming up, Blisk. And
thank you, Blisk. So we're going to bring in next. Let's go, Crazy Maisie. Quick question, and we're going to continue through these last 5.
Hello. So I've got this. I'm sorry for your experience. I've been listening for like half or like a little bit, and I've got a question concerning the humans, as you call them.
The ones who created us, or us?
Yeah.
Humans?
Like you mentioned, you were like abducted, I think.
I agreed to an abduction.
Yeah.
And I never actually got abducted.
Yeah, and my question was, do they look like us? The humans?
That a different experience allowed me to know what I was interacting with, as I didn't mention that experience because it was irrelevant, but I just mentioned that they're humans. They're like us. They're raised differently. That was also mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, that they are raised somewhere else, away from, not on the surface on the planet, for the sole purpose of manipulating humans.
I see.
Globally. They're a global influence.
I'm sorry, just last question. Is it related to the stars? Are they like in the stars?
It's an illusion. It's a target, like it's not hallucination. It's if I were to guess, some kind of way of bending the rods and cones in your eyes and how they perceive light, and they'll move in patterns and like instructions. The last instructions of which those the bilocation instructions that I refuse to do, and that's all they're interested in doing is communicating that, and I just keep ignoring them and fucking with them. And now that my friend's dead, they piss me off real bad.
Thank you for your question, Crazy Maisie. We're gonna answer just a few more questions tonight because we're coming up on 3 hours. So, Amphibian, you're gonna be up next. Amphibian, welcome to the stage. Jump up here.
I appreciate that. So I'm actually one of the managers of the Alliance, and I was just gonna say that we're gonna abduct you real soon. So just get ready to meet. It's the Star Mothership. right outside the Milky Way.
Sounds legit. Sounds totally legit. Thank you, Amphibian. You got a response to that?
Somehow I expected people to respond in similar.
No worries, no worries. So we're gonna also bring up two more people. I think we're gonna bring up Jason. Corpse husband. I guess. Jason something. Do you have a question for Amanda Carr here? You waved. Do you have a question? Going twice. All right. Thank you, Jason, for that non-question. And we're gonna go to Defoe. Defoe, do you have a question? That was very enlightening. Thank you for making us edit our podcast to remove hate speech. We appreciate it. All right, fantastic. Well, let's bring up Shawnatello because I know she's at least not going to give us some bullshit. Come on up, Shawnatello.
Funny stuff, though.
Hello. You want to come up? You've been invited. You can come up. These other people did. There you go. You got a question?
Sorry, it's my first time coming up on stage. Yeah, I was just wondering, what led you to believe that your friend was made to take their life? Like, was there anything that you knew in your heart that they were not, not well? I suppose.
Well, at this point in my life, I don't believe in coincidences, and the kind of angry, pissed energy that I was received that day when I basically did what I did on my birthday. The fact that he died 2 days after, I was expecting something to occur, and my friend Blisk here, he was a part. All three of us were friends mutually. He raised his hand. He might want to include himself in this last bit. If you would want to bring him up to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Shawnatello, do you want to take any more questions to Carr or no?
I brought up Blisk. He re-raised his hand after that question.
Yeah, I actually have my own perspective on this event because I was talking to Emmanuel during most of his depressive episodes leading up to his death. I know. I know Marcus, Drac'aar here, seems to think that it was the influence of the shower garment, but I personally would be able to say, if that is it, so on one hand, the decision seemed sudden, but at the other, it was natural. I didn't sense any overt anxiety from him about it, and this is something that he was mulling over, and he said to have many experiences sort of revolving around the idea of death and confronting his own mortality, and etc. And none of those seem to be overtly malicious to me. More were just calm and apprehensive.
What he's saying is that I believe, Blisk, you're saying that there was no involvement in your eyes and your perspective. That the shadow.
I'm inclined to believe that there wasn't any involvement, but again, it's not something I can say for certain. At the very least, it was out of his own will. Whether that will was, and that will, to me, seemed mostly influenced by his own personal experiences and internal musings.
Yeah, we understand. So you're saying you think it was a natural suicide rather than a targeted hit, basically.
Yeah, he spoke to him the day before. Yes, he had communications with him there, and during that time, but the fact that that happened, and I expected some form of retaliation. I was not made aware of his death for a month and 14 days, unfortunately. But I was expecting some kind of response from angering them so badly. I did not think that they would go after a friend of mine like that. And I don't believe in coincidences that in 2 days later that this happens. I just can't just ignore the fact and just it. To me, I'm not. I can't say that at all that it's a coincidence. And we disagree on this, and it's okay.
Yeah, I understand, brother. I do. So thank you, Blisk, for your contributions. I'm going to move you back to the audience, but thank you. Do you want to take one final question, Drac'aar?
Sure. But just if NSA is actually listening to this, if you know anything about these forces, possibly being able to drive someone to commit suicide, what would you have? If you have anything to say, raise your hand. Otherwise, whoever's left to will answer their question.
Yeah, so NSA, Drac'aar would like your particular feedback, so hit that wavy hand if you want to say something. Otherwise, we're going to take the final question on the list here, which is from Starblight. So, Starblight, come on up, ask us your question. Please don't be a douchebag.
Oh, hello. Nice. Actually, it's like kind of a two-part question. If that's fine with you, Drac'aar. The first is beginning with when you mentioned like the trauma-based, I would assume mind control. Like when you said that they can scramble your brains, like are they like is the technology like advanced enough? Like they're pretty much just using high-frequency weapons. Like is it like that or like?
It's to me, it's like electromagnetic frequencies and technologies that utilize the currents, wireless currents in the air enforced by perhaps conductive particles, maybe by the chemtrails that allow that. I can only guess. I can only speculate what technologies they can use. When I said scramble my brains, that was just thrown out the air wave, possibly randomly kill me. But I've been under their surveillance. There's nothing stopping them from doing something to take my life. And I'm up on the list enough to be watched to a severe degree, and I have no reason to think that if they wanted me dead, I would be dead.
Interesting. Okay. My second question is kind of related to that. How much do you know about orgone energy or orgonite?
Orgonite. Are you talking about anti-electromagnetic radiation, or are you talking about one of them crystals?
Yeah, like EMF, like EMF. Yeah. You know, like.
I'd say that my response to that is to look more into graphene.
Oh, I'm aware. I'm aware of the subject. I know. I was just seeing how much you knew on the subject, but
no, I intend on making a hat with these types of materials and see if it affects their ability to use the illusionary stars and shit, and other things too.
Interesting. Okay. Assuming you know about since you know about it, the subject in mind when it comes to orgone energy, I will bring his name up real quick. Like, look into the research of Wilhelm Reich if you haven't already. Look into dive into that, do a deep dive. And yeah,
PM me that name and I'll look it up.
Okay.
Yeah,
sure.
And again, I want to remind you guys that we've done a 3-hour podcast here with Drac'aar, which is fantastic. But this is the kind of material we cover every day in the Roundtable Discord server. So if you want to get deeper into this than we can do in one episode, please join us there. We have 24/7 voice chats and we talk about this kind of stuff. So if you got material to bring to the table, information, we want to see you in the roundtable.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Starblight. We appreciate your question. I'm going to move you back to the audience. I think it's time to close up the questions. So Drac'aar, amazing. 3 hours of high quality content, very well attended, a lot of great questions from the audience. So do you agree it's time to close this puppy up?
Absolutely. I've stretched myself out as much as I can. I wish I could have been a little bit more clear, like I was with you the other day, because it was coming out of me, like flowing out of me very, very nicely when I was speaking to you the other day. I still think this was good. I still think those who stayed here were troopers, if they stayed through the whole thing and were that interested enough to keep listening.
I think it was fantastic. Actually, since I came back to Discord about 11 days ago, this was our most attended event. We peaked out at 30 members in the chat. That's great. So great job, Drac'aar. 3 hours, well attended, totally unique content. I'm very grateful, and I'm gonna promote you right up to Knight of the Round Table if you would accept that rank.
Surely, and there was this whole thing was an honor. I appreciate you pushing me to do this. I really do.
All right. Well, welcome to the Knights Round Table. You've earned it tonight. And thank you to the audience. Thank you to those who asked questions. And if you have more questions, join the Roundtable Discord server. So thank you, Drac'aar, and find our 250 plus podcasts on YouTube and BitChute and hashtag RT Podcasts on the Roundtable Discord server. We record this podcast every day at 8 p.m. Central. So join us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. for a very special podcast that's near and dear to my heart. And check hashtag announcements to see what's coming up every day. Great job, Drac'aar. Amazing. Welcome to Knights Roundtable. Great job, everyone in the audience. Great questions tonight for the most part. And I'm going to close the chat, but I hope you guys will join me in the Roundtable chat because now it's Roundtable after hours and it's time to have some fun. So God bless, and I'll see you guys upstairs in RT Podcast voice chat. God bless. See you later. Thank you, Drac'aar. Bye.
Thank you.